So in this episode, we're going to talk about how to style the form we created in the last episode. And as you guys can see, I do actually already have my form right here inside my index.html. And the reason I want to talk about styling a form for an entire episode is because styling forms can be a little bit tricky in the beginning, and it's not entirely the same as styling div boxes and text. So we're just going to go ahead and take this one from, I guess we're going to start from the top of the form and just kind of work our way down to the bottom and style each individual input and text area and button and that kind of thing. So we're going to talk about how to change the sizes, how to alter the text. We do already have the placeholder inside our text areas and inputs, and it might be a little bit difficult figuring out how to style the text that you actually see inside the input. If we take a look at it here, we do have a grayed out first name and last name inside these boxes. And since they're not really text, you might have trouble figuring out how to style them. We're also going to talk about how to eliminate the resizing feature of the text area, which is something that you see in some websites, but it's just not something that you want to do, all the time. So going into our code, we're going to go ahead and say, we're going to go ahead and talk about how we're going to target each element in here, because we have a couple of different options. Either we can give each input a class and then go ahead and target the class inside the style sheet, or we can go ahead and just kind of target the div class we have around our form called form-box and say inside this div we have a form and we have an input. And I think that's the best way to do in this episode. You could also just target the form, but since we might have more than one form on our website, we would be styling every single form on our website. So that wouldn't be a good idea for this example. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go into our style sheet, and right on top of our footer, underneath our form-box, we're just going to go ahead and copy our form-box styling and paste it below. Now, we're going to go ahead and change the path. So it says form-box space form space input. So now we're targeting every single input inside this specific form. So we could give it a width. And since we already have the width down here, we might as well just change it. And I think we should make it into 40%, because I don't think it's nice to have a first and last name input field going all the way across the screen, because that would be too much. So 40% is plenty, I think. We also need to give it a height, and we're going to go ahead and do that below here. We're going to set it to 30 pixels, just because that's what I feel like setting it to. You guys can do whatever you want. I'm just going to go ahead and delete these last two stylings we copied down from the form-box, because I want to show you guys how it looks like right now. So if we save it, you refresh the browser, you guys will notice that we do actually get 40% for each of these, and that's actually quite a lot. If you take a look at it right here, if I zoom out to 100%, you guys will see it's actually not that bad. So what we can do here is we can actually go back into our index file, and you guys may remember we did actually not include a break in between the inputs. So let's go ahead and copy the break tag we have underneath the last input of the last name and paste it in between these two, like so. If you refresh the browser, you guys will notice that we get first name and last name below each other. So after doing this, going into our style sheet, let's go ahead and give it a margin from the bottom, because we want a little bit of spacing between these two inputs. So let's say margin bottom. Set it to 4 pixels, just because I don't think it looks nice if we have too much of a spacing. Save it and refresh. And you guys will see when I zoom in that we do have a bit of spacing between them. Now, here's the thing. When we include a width and a height and that kind of thing, you may notice that both the placeholder and if you type text is actually pretty close to the left side of our text box. So we need to include some spacing to the left side of this box. And the way we do that is with a padding. So if we go inside our input, styling again, and we go down to the next line and we say padding, left. Now, we should probably do it left and right in case, I don't know how long a last and a first name can be, but if they do actually have a name that goes all the way to the other side, we should probably also have a padding to the right side as well. So let's go ahead and delete our padding left and just write padding, like so. Now we're going to go ahead and say from the top and bottom, we want 0 pixels because I don't see a reason to add a padding to top and bottom. And from left and right, we're going to go ahead and say, what should we say? 6 pixels and save it. Or we could say 1%. That would actually be, well, let's say 0.5% instead of 6 pixels. So 0.5%, save it and refresh. And you guys will notice we do have a bit of spacing, like so. So that's essentially how we style an input. Now you guys may notice we do already have a default border going around the text box. Right now, it actually looks quite fine, I think, for a white background. But if you want to change the color, we can actually go in and add a border to our input form. And we're just going to do that by writing border, colon, not semicolon, colon. And then we're going to give it a thickness, which is in this case 1 pixel. Space, we can say, should it be a dotted line? Should it be a solid line? Let's go ahead and make it solid for now. Space. And then we need to give it a color. And you can either just type red, orange, or give it a color code. I'm just going to go ahead and say orange. Save it. Refresh the browser. And you guys will notice we have a different type of border going around our input. So if I go ahead and delete the orange, because I don't think the orange is nice, I'm just going to go ahead and write CCC and the hashtag in front of it, of course, which is the color code for a very light gray, which is roughly the same gray as we had before. So now we have this, we can actually go ahead and continue. So going down to these down here, you guys may notice that, well, the dot kind of changed size and it kind of moved over a little bit. And the reason for that is because right now our width, well, the dot here is always going to be centered inside our input. And you guys may notice that we styled every single input inside this form, meaning that these dots are actually going to be 40% all the way to the side. And then the dot will be centered, which is in the middle, of course. And because of the height we set as 30 pixels, the dot will actually increase in size to be 30 pixels high and wide. So the way we change these is, well, we do actually need to specify these specifically. So what we're going to go ahead and do is just going to go ahead and give these to a class. So down where we have the radio type inputs, we're going to say class equal to quotation marks. And then let's just go ahead and say form dash radio. And then we're just going to go ahead and copy this class, paste it to the one below it, since they're essentially the same. Save it. And then we can actually take this form dash radio styling, or at least class, and put it inside our style sheet below here. I'm going to say class, paste in form dash radio, and open up the code. So from here, we can actually go ahead and say, well, we don't want the width to be 40%. Let's go ahead and make the width, well, we can actually go ahead and just copy all this down. There we go. And we're just going to go ahead and say width as, what should we say? 1%. I have no idea how much that is, but we can check it out once we do actually refresh the browser. And the height should probably be something more like 10 pixels. Save it. And I do not think we need anything else here. So let's just go ahead and see how it looks like. Okay, it didn't actually change anything. So let's go ahead and add delete our padding here. Oh, I do actually know why. The reason it didn't change is because it's still looking at this styling up here, which means that we need to overwrite whatever styling we put on it up here. And this is a very good chance to show you guys how to do a CSS hack. And it's not really hacking like you see it in movies, but it's a CSS hack where you essentially go in and say that it needs to ignore any other kind of styling added to this specific element and add this piece of code instead. Now, the way you do that is by, for example, the width. Right now it's still at 40% inside our website here, even though we set it to 1%. So inside the width styling, after the 1%, before the semicolon, we need to add exclamation mark, I think that's what it's called, and then write important, like so. Now, what this important does is say, okay, this is a very important piece of code. You should ignore any other kind of styling that might interfere with this piece of code. So now that we have this, we save it, refresh our browser, you guys will notice that our styling does actually work. So now we style these boxes again so they look a little bit more normal and they're not centered over here, they're not very big. Now, if you want to style the text, all you need to do is add, well, right now, if you take a look at the index file, you guys will see that we don't actually have any text or like paragraph tags around our text up here, which is male and female. And if you want to style this, you just need to add the p tags. Let's actually go ahead and do it just for the heck of it. So I made a couple of p tags. I opened and closed it after the text. Then I'm just going to go ahead and copy it up on top of here. So we have it on both of them. And now we can just target the p tags inside our form. So if we go up and copy our form up here, paste it below, and say instead of targeting the input, we're going to target the P inside the form. So now we can just go ahead and give it some different stylings. For example, we can give it a font size as, let's say, 16 pixels. Let's go ahead and give it a color as, I don't know. Well, let's not make any fancy colors. Let's just make it a very dark gray, which would be 282828. Of course, we need to add a hashtag in front of it, otherwise it's not a color code. And we can just go ahead and give it a font family. So we have a font family called Lato, because I think we did already add that one in this series. So I'm just going to go ahead and save this and refresh my browser. And as you guys will see, we do actually get some styling. Now you'll notice that the text did actually hop down to the next line. That is because we do actually need to tell it to float left. Otherwise, like we talked about with the floating, if we don't float two elements, they won't go next to each other. So we need to float left, save it. And then up here, inside our form-radio, we also need to float it. Otherwise, it won't float next to each other. And we save it. Now, I did actually open the wrong browser there. But if we refresh, you guys will notice they hop next to each other. You'll also notice now that our text is not entirely in the middle of the dots. And our input is actually floating next to our other input here. Now, it's kind of tiny. Let me try and zoom in so you guys can see it. Yeah, so we do have an input here, and then we have the text coming, and then we have another input, and then the text area is actually floating as well. So we need to actually tell it to stop somewhere. So the way we clear a float is by writing clear both, which means we're clearing both of the floating elements. So inside our form-radio, since we want it to stop floating when the next input starts, at least the radio input, in the beginning of our code inside form-radio, we're going to write clear both. Save it, and as you guys will notice, it jumps down to the next line. Now, you guys will also notice that our text area is also floating to the left of our female text. And that's because sometimes elements coming after certain floating elements, if they're inside the same, what should I call it, level or like layer of code, they will go next to each other. If they're all child elements that are sisters and brothers, then they will go next to each other when you float. So we do actually need to tell the text area to stop floating. But for now, let's go ahead and try and move the text down a little bit. So inside our form P styling, let's say padding, top, and then set it to, what should we say, 20 pixels. That might be way too much. Let's go ahead and take a look. That was actually way too much, so let's go ahead and say 10 pixels instead. It's a little tough for me when I'm zoomed in on the browser right now. I'm way zoomed in, man. Like, I'm at 400% zoomed in for you guys. So it's a little tough for me to calculate how much we need to increase and decrease sizes. So this is how we move the text, and this is how we style it. So now let's go ahead and style the text area and remove this weird looking resize thing. So going into our code inside our style sheet, let's go ahead and copy our, let's copy the input that we created and put it below our form P. And instead of form input, we're going to start styling the form space text area, like so. Now the width we're going to keep at 40 pixels, I guess. Well, let's make it a little bigger. Let's make it 60 pixels, 60%. And the height, let's go ahead and make that one 300 pixels. Might be too much, I don't know. Let's go ahead and just try something out. And the margin bottom, we're going to keep at 4 pixels. We're also going to keep the padding, because as well as the form, I do believe once we start typing, we'll actually need to increase some spacing on the left side as well, like we did on the inputs. So let's keep that for now. The border, we want to keep the same color as the input, so we're going to keep that there as well. If I save it now, refresh my browser. Oh, we did actually forget one thing. We needed to clear both as well here. Save it. Now we can refresh our browser. And we did actually not get it to jump down. And why did we not do that? Okay, so the clear both doesn't work. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to go ahead and go into our index file. We're going to go ahead and take the break that we have in between the radio input and the text area. And we're going to add 3 more to add some spacing. So after we've done that, we refresh. You guys will see that it does actually jump down to the next line. So what we can do now is, you guys may notice if I start writing something inside my form, you can see that we don't quite get the same spacing. Let me go ahead and zoom in for you guys. We don't get quite the same spacing from the top of the letters to the border of the text box as we do up in the input up here. So in order to add that spacing, we're going to have to go inside our text area styling. And then when we set padding, instead of just adding a padding to left and right, we need to add one from the top and bottom as well. So we're going to add 6 pixels of spacing from top and bottom, or 6 pixels of padding. Refresh our browser and you guys will notice we now have roughly the same spacing. Now you might also notice that inside our text area, the fonts are not looking entirely the same, and we need to style them in order to have the same font. So going into our code again, inside the text area, of course, we're going to go ahead and say font. Actually, let's just go ahead and copy the paragraph up here. So let's go ahead and say font size. We want that one. We want the color. We want the font family. So let's just go ahead and copy that one and paste it below here inside the text area. Let's do that as well for the input. Up here at the top, the one called input. So we have them inside the input fields as well. I'm going to go ahead and save it and refresh. Now if I type something, you guys will notice that we have the same font. So now that we have this, we can actually talk about getting rid of this weird resizing thing we have going on here. Now you guys will actually notice that because I set a certain width and a height, we can't get it smaller than that height and width, but we can still get it bigger. So what we need to do is we need to eliminate this little icon down here in the corner that lets us resize it. So inside the styling, inside the text area, we're going to go ahead and say resize, colon, and set it to none. Save it, refresh the browser, and you guys will notice that we do get rid of it. We can't actually resize it. Okay, so I did actually skip ahead a bit here because I wanted to show you guys that you can also resize the text area either vertically only or horizontally only. Because you see it on an example like Facebook. They do actually have some text areas that you can write in, such as your newsfeed inside your user page. You can actually resize it vertically up and down, but you can't do it horizontally. So what if you want to do that? Well, inside resize, we can either say none for eliminating the resize feature. We can also say both, meaning that we can resize both directions like it is as a default. We can also say vertical, save it, refresh the browser, and you guys will notice that I cannot resize it to the side, but I can do it up and down. And then if I want to resize it horizontally, we write horizontal, like so. Resize or refresh the browser, and you guys will notice that we can do it horizontally, but not up and down. So that's another way you can do this if you want to. So I'm just going to go ahead and go back here to none, since that's what we want to begin with. And let's talk about customizing the submit button down here. So inside our text area, or below our text area, we do actually want to add another styling. So let's go ahead and just go up and copy our form input, I guess is nice. Actually, let's take the form box because we can actually use that one. We're going to paste it below here. And we're going to say after form dash box, we're going to say, well, we do have a button inside of here. Save it. And we're going to go ahead and set the button as something else. Let's go ahead and set it in pixels instead. Let's say 60. Actually, no, let's say 80 pixels. Let's give it a height as the same as the input, since it would match up. So we're going to set it to 30 pixels. Then we're going to eliminate the padding. We don't need it. We're going to go ahead and say background color. We're going to set it to blue, I guess. So we have something. Actually, let's say orange, because we do have an orange theme going on our website right now. So let's go ahead and make the background color orange. Now, if I refresh it, and you guys will notice, we do get some color going on and all that good stuff. But we still have a border around our button. We do also have a black text inside of here, which might not look very nice. So let's go ahead and style that as well. So we're going to go ahead and go up and copy the border code from our text area. We're going to paste it inside our button code. And then we're going to go ahead and say border, delete everything in here, and say none. So now we'll have no border when I refresh it, like so. Just going to go ahead and zoom in for you guys. Now what we can do is we need to style the text. And inside our button here, we're going to go ahead and say, well, we can just copy what we have up here. We can say the color, the font size, and the font family, and just paste it below here. Now, instead of having it black, I would like to have it white text. So if I save it now, refresh, you guys will notice we get a white text. Now, sometimes, and this is just a little trick for you guys, sometimes when you do write something like this, and you say, well, it might look nice if we make everything uppercase so that all the letters are big letters and not the uncapitalized ones. And if you want to do that without having to go inside your HTML code, but do it directly using CSS code, what you can do is you can go inside your coding inside your CSS and say text dash transform uppercase and save it. So now you guys will notice it's uppercase. So now we do actually have a form that looks somewhat nice. And I would like to show you guys what we can do with it, when we do actually submit something, because I did tell you guys last episode that I did actually need to set up a server. Now, setting up a server, if you want to do something, well, let me go ahead and mention this, because this is actually pretty important to know. When I started learning about creating forms and stuff in HTML, like way back when I was only learning HTML and CSS, I tried to make a contact form. And when I set it up, I noticed that I needed to install a local server on my computer. And you can actually do that for free. And once I did that, which you guys probably don't know what a local server is, but I can tell you guys, once I actually did that and got my PHP code working, which needed to send my form to an email, it didn't work. And that's because you do actually need to have the website online for it to send an email to an actual email address. So having a form like this is nice, but if you want to do something with it, you either need to set up a local server, and even then, a few features won't actually be working unless you actually get it online. So I'm just mentioning that for you guys, since it's pretty important to know, so you don't sit down and try to create a contact form right now and learn how to set up a server if you do actually learn it by yourself and it's still not working. I can tell you guys straight away, it's because it's not online. So we will actually be talking at some point, I guess, about how to create this form and make it into a contact form and how to actually send it via an email. So we will be talking about in one of the episodes coming up how to actually set up a local server, because it's actually very easy to do. And since we don't have anything more complicated than just needing to get some PHP code working, like we don't actually need a database and use it. We just need to get a local server running so we can use PHP, and that is not difficult at all. It takes literally less than 10 minutes to set up. So what we can do is we can talk about that in one episode, and then we'll create an actual contact form with this form. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you guys next time.